The smallest contestant walks in. The auditorium buzzed with its usual pre-audition energy. Crowds murmuring, judges settling in, cameras sliding across tracks as they captured every moment. But even in that familiar chaos, something unusual was about to happen, something that would shift the tone of the entire room. The stage lights dimmed slightly, and the giant LED screen glowed with the next contestant's name, Milo Santos, 10 years old, Philippines. Backstage, a tiny boy stood frozen at the edge of the curtain. Milo Santos was so small that his contestant badge looked oversized on his chest. He tugged at his slightly wrinkled shirt, clearly not designer, clearly not new, but carefully ironed by someone who wanted him to look his best. His sneakers had cartoon characters on the sides, and he wore them like Lucky Charms. Milo glanced at the stage, then at the cameras, then down at his shaking hands. Beside him stood his mother, kneeling down to whisper, "You can do this. Lolo is watching." He nodded softly and pressed the pendant around his neck between his palms. The pendant wasn't flashy, just a little round locket containing a photo of him with his grandfather, the man who taught him how to sing, the man who used to say, "A small boy can still have a big voice," the man he dedicated this audition to. Milo took a shaky breath and stepped out into the blinding lights. The audience's chatter softened as they tried to figure out who this tiny silhouette belonged to. As he walked toward the center of the stage, the size difference looked almost comical. One small boy on a massive AGT stage built for superstars. Sofia tilted her head with a warm smile. Heidi whispered to her, "He's adorable." Howie raised his brows, curious. Simon leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable but clearly skeptical. The moment Milo reached the mic, he hesitated. The microphone stood too tall for him. A stagehand rushed in from the side, quickly adjusting it downward while the audience chuckled affectionately. "Hi there," Howie said gently. "What's your name?" "Milo," he whispered. His voice was so soft the microphone barely caught it. "How old are you?" Heidi asked with that motherly smile. 10. Simon narrowed his eyes slightly, leaning forward. "And what are you going to do for us today?" Milo clutched the pendant again. I'm going to sing," the audience responded, with polite applause, but the atmosphere was honest. Everyone assumed this would be a sweet, cute, short audition. "Nothing extraordinary." Simon continued, "Why did you choose this song? And why AG?" The boy swallowed hard, then spoke with trembling sincerity. "My grandpa, he always told me to sing from my heart. He passed away last year, and before he left, he told me to try this show. He said I should show the world that even small voices—" He paused, voice tightening with emotion, "can be big." A hush fell across the auditorium. You could feel the warmth and sympathy swirling through the room. But even then, no one expected miracles. They expected sweetness, bravery, maybe a surprising note or two, but not greatness, not history. Simon nodded slowly, softening just a little. "All right, Milo, we're ready when you are." The spotlights focused. The room went quiet. The intro music started. Milo's eyes closed, shutting out the towering audience, the 4 judges, the thousands of eyes watching. He imagined standing in his grandfather's living room again, singing while the old man tapped his foot with pride. He took one deep breath. The crowd leaned forward. Then, a sound emerged that didn't match his size, age, or appearance. A voice so rich, so unexpectedly full, so emotionally charged that the first rows instinctively gasped. It wasn't just strong, it was polished. It vibrated with soul. It carried the maturity and pain of someone 3 times his age, the kind of voice that makes everyone look around to see if someone else is singing. Even the judges jerked slightly, their eyes widening. Backstage, a group of teenage dancers froze mid-stretch, staring at the monitor. Crew members turned their heads. One cameraman actually whispered, "No way." Milo wasn't just good, he was exceptional. The audience started murmuring in disbelief. People sat up straighter. They leaned forward. A father in the 4th row mouthed, "What the?" And Milo just kept going, hitting notes with precision, confidence slowly building with each measure of the song. His posture straightened. His shoulders relaxed. His eyes opened, shining under the stage lights. He was transforming before their eyes, from a trembling child to a young artist discovering his power. Simon's expression shifted dramatically. From neutral skepticism to quiet alertness to something the audience rarely saw, a look of genuine shock. The corners of his mouth parted slightly, his eyebrows pulled upward. He leaned in, elbows on the desk. This was no longer just another audition. This was the moment the entire room realized they were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary. Milo Santos, the smallest contestant of the night, had just revealed a giant voice capable of moving thousands. And the best part? This was only the beginning. The judges can't believe their ears. When Milo hit the very first high note, something electric rippled through the room. It wasn't just admiration, it was shock. Pure, unfiltered shock. Sofia's eyes instantly widened. Heidi's mouth dropped open. Howie leaned forward, squinting like he couldn't believe what his ears were telling him. But Simon's reaction was the most telling. The man who had heard thousands of singers, the man who rarely looked impressed in the first 10 seconds of any performance, slowly straightened in his chair. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed, not in skepticism, but in awe. Milo wasn't just singing well, he was delivering a performance that felt unreal for someone his age. The audience sensed it too. The energy in the room shifted like a wave changing direction. People who were casually watching suddenly leaned forward, whispering stopped. Even camera operators adjusted their shots, instinctively realizing they were capturing a moment that could go down in AGT history. Milo transitioned into the second verse of Whitney Houston's Run to You. It was a bold choice, a nearly impossible song for adults and practically unheard of for a 10-year-old. But Milo sang with a control that didn't belong to his age. His vibrato came naturally, his breathing was controlled, and his emotional expression was astonishingly mature. Every lyric seemed to come from a place deep within him, from the pain of losing his grandfather, from the fear of standing on the world's biggest stage, and from the courage to honor the dream he carried in his heart. As he sang, a soft spotlight followed him, turning the massive AGT stage into his personal universe. He reached a soft, delicate run, a tricky sequence even professionals often struggle with, and he absolutely nailed it. The audience reacted instantly, a collective gasp rising from all corners of the auditorium. Sofia slapped her hands. Over her mouth, Heidi whispered, "Oh my gosh." Howie looked around the room in disbelief. Simon turned to Howie and mouthed a single word, clearly visible on camera: insane. The cameras captured everything: the glistening of Milo's eyes, the trembling of his tiny shoulders, the astonished reactions of every judge, and the growing excitement of the live audience. Then came the chorus, and this was the moment that changed everything. All the lights dimmed except for a single spotlight on Milo. The background screens slowly began to glow with soft blues and whites, creating a dreamy atmosphere. Milo lifted his chin slightly, inhaled, and delivered a note so powerful and so emotionally loaded that several people in the audience stood up spontaneously. It wasn't polite applause. It was instinct, shock, emotion. Parents in the crowd grabbed their kids. Teenagers gasped and covered their mouths. A group of women in the fourth row stood before they even realized they had moved. Cameras cut to the judges. Sofia's eyes were glistening with tears. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "He's unbelievable." Heidi pressed both hands against her heart. Howie shook his head as if trying to reset his brain. And Simon had stopped blinking. His hands were on the desk, his mouth slightly open. It was the face he made only when witnessing something rare, something magical. Milo moved into the bridge, a part of the song known for its demanding vocal transitions. The orchestra swelled behind him. The lights brightened, and Milo, this tiny boy with a trembling start, seemed to grow taller with every second. His voice soared, higher, stronger, fuller. The judges didn't just look impressed, they looked spellbound. As Milo approached the final big note, the note that only confident, seasoned singers dare to attempt, the entire room held its breath. It felt like Tim. He paused. Slow-motion cameras captured. Sofia gripping the desk. Heidi leaning forward. Simon's eyes locked on Milo, people in the audience covering their mouths, backstage performers clustering around the monitor. Milo took a step forward, a move so natural and emotional it felt like instinct rather than choreography. He inhaled, he lifted his chin, and he unleashed a note so powerful that the arena erupted like an explosion. The sound was massive, the emotion was overwhelming, the reaction was immediate. The audience leapt to their feet, cheering, screaming, clapping, crying. People waved their arms in the air. Some were shaking their heads in disbelief. A father lifted his daughter onto his shoulders so she could see. Even security guards at the back were smiling and clapping. The judges shot out of their seats. Sofia screamed, "What?" Heidi shouted, "How?" Howie laughed in pure astonishment. Simon stood slowly, eyes glued to Milo, a rare smile breaking on his lips. The camera zoomed in on Milo, a 10-year-old boy standing at the center of an arena, filled with thousands, shaking but glowing, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. He had delivered one of the most stunning moments in AGT history, and he had no idea what was coming next. Because the judges weren't just impressed, they were about to change his life. The golden buzzer heard around the world. As Milo released the final note, his tiny chest rose and fell rapidly, his breath trembling with the effort he had poured into the performance. The last vibration of his voice hung in the air like a shimmering echo. For a moment, a long, stunning moment, the auditorium fell into absolute silence. No applause, no whispers, not even the sound of a seat shifting. The kind of silence that only happens when thousands of people are collectively stunned. Milo looked out into the blur of lights and shadows, unsure of what was happening. His hands clutched the pendant around his neck as fear flickered across his face. Did he do something wrong? Did he mess up? Then, the audience erupted. A tidal wave of cheers crashed against the stage. People jumped to their feet, screaming his name. Some covered their faces with their hands, shaking in disbelief. Others clapped until their palms turned red. The noise rose like a storm, loud, emotional, unstoppable. Milo's eyes widened, his lips parting in surprise. A single tear escaped down his cheek. On the judges' panel, the reactions were nothing short of legendary. Sofia stood first, her hands still clasped over her mouth. Her eyes were filled with tears, sparkling under the stage lights. She looked as if she wanted to sprint onto the stage and hug the boy. Heidi was next to rise, her hands over her heart as she mouthed, "Unbelievable." Howie laughed in disbelief, shaking his head as if trying to process what he'd just witnessed. But all eyes eventually shifted to one man, Simon Cowell. Simon stood slowly, not with the usual teasing smile, not with the smirk he reserved for great auditions. This time he stood because he was genuinely moved. His expression was soft, almost fatherly, something rarely seen on AGT's stage. He leaned forward, both hands on the judge's desk, and said in a steady, emotional voice, "Milo, I don't even know where to begin. What you just did," he paused, searching for words, "was extraordinary. You shocked this entire room." A roar from the audience followed his words. Milo wiped his face with the back of his hand. His tiny voice trembled. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Simon continued, "You know what I saw just now? Not just talent, but heart. Real heart. And that's something you can't teach." Heidi nodded vigorously. "You have the voice of an angel. And the sea. Urge of a lion," Howie chimed in, smiling warmly. "You just changed your life, kid. You really did." Then everyone looked at Sofia. She had not sat down. She hadn't even moved from the moment the performance ended. She stood with her hand on her chest, breathing deeply, overwhelmed by emotion. Slowly, she turned toward her fellow judges. The room sensed it instantly. Her chair scraped back slightly. The crowd screamed. Milo blinked, confused. Sofia pushed her long hair behind her shoulders and stepped forward, speaking in a trembling voice. "Milo, you didn't just sing. You told a story. You made us feel something real. And your grandfather—" Her voice cracked. "He would be so proud of you." The audience was practically vibrating with anticipation. The golden lights above the stage began to flicker softly, hinting at what was about to happen. Sofia placed both hands on the judge's desk, took one final emotional breath, and slammed the golden buzzer. The moment her hand hit the button, the entire arena exploded. Golden confetti erupted from the ceiling, tumbling down in waves. The floor lights blasted upward. The music thundered through the speakers. The whole room transformed into a glowing, sparkling celebration. Milo gasped as the first pieces of gold touched his hair. His hands shot up to his face. Tears of shock streamed down his cheeks. His mother rushed from backstage, running straight toward him. The audience cheered even louder as she wrapped her arms around her son, pulling him into the tightest, most emotional hug. Milo buried his face into her shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably as confetti swirled around them like a golden storm. Sofia left her seat and walked onto the stage, her eyes overflowing with tears of pure joy. She knelt beside Milo, placing a gentle hand on his back. "You deserve this," she whispered into the microphone. "You say everything coming your way." Simon stood at the judges' table, watching with the proudest smile he had shown all night. It was the smile he only gave true stars, the type he knew would go far beyond AGT. The cameras captured everything, the confetti raining endlessly, the emotional embrace between Milo and his mother, Sofia's heartfelt encouragement, the stunned, joyous faces of the audience, Simon's nod of approval, soft and genuine. The narrator's voice echoed over the celebration, and with one performance, a tiny boy with a giant voice just captured the world's heart. As the music swelled and the confetti continued to fall, Milo lifted his head. His small frame shook, but in his eyes, something had changed. Confidence, hope, and the realization that dreams, even the smallest ones, can grow into something spectacular. This wasn't just an audition. This was a moment the world would replay for years. This was the golden buzzer that people would talk about in every highlight reel. This was the rise of Milo Santos, the tiny boy with the giant voice. Fade out, end of episode.